John Smith Centre for Public Service hopes to foster his legacy and restore faith in politics, politicians and public service. So they've got a bit of a task on their hands. I'm joined now by Catherine Smith, who's the daughter of John and chair of the John Smith Trust, and Kezia Dugdale, the former Scottish Labour leader, who's announced she's quitting the Scottish Parliament to become the Centre's new director. Welcome to both of you. Catherine Smith, just very briefly explain what you're, not the details of exactly what you're doing, but what the ambition of the Trust is to do in terms of restoring faith in politics.
So it's the John Smith Centre for Public Service, and it's based in the University of Glasgow. And our mission is to promote a positive vision for representative politics, to try and encourage those who are interested in politics but are seeing a very negative discourse around politics at the moment, to consider actually stepping up and doing it, to break down barriers to that, because we recognise and see that there are a number of barriers to people who want to do that.
So you're bringing people into work with MSPs, aren't you?
It's representative politics across a range of institutions. We work with the Scottish Parliament at the moment with an internship programme, which is the first paid internship programme that the Parliament has had. But we're launching our Westminster Parliamentary Internship Programme next year.
The obvious problem with this, and I'm not saying there are simple answers, but you've also criticised the fact that MPs and MSPs nowadays tend not to have had what people think of as proper jobs before they become politicians. But it sounds like your internship programme is just another instance of that people come out of university, become special advisors or your interns, and end up being politicians. It's not really breaking the mould, is it?
So, well, that's an assumption on your part that that's A, what we encourage them to do, and B, what they will do. And,
so you're saying it's not?
It's quite wrong. What the message that we're giving to our students who take part in our internships is that this is something that you should consider doing in the future. We give the same message to schools. We're working with a great organisation called Speakers for Schools, getting practitioners into schools. And it's about sowing a seed. It's about seeing someone inspirational in politics, seeing a positive vision of that when you're young, and thinking, do you know what, I might do that one day. I won't necessarily do it now, but in 5, 10, maybe 20 years' time, that seed was sown when you saw someone speaking in a particular way that is not the discourse in the media, and you stepped up and did it. The other thing that we're doing with our internship programmes is rolling it out into offering it to people in the workplace. And that's a quite different cohort of people. That's people in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, who are interested in serving but simply don't know how to access it, who don't have a background in politics, who haven't been a special advisor, as you suggest, but who really have something to give. So we're going to offer them the opportunity to take part in the internships. And then that is a direct step to considering standing for politics, because they do have the lived experience to offer to their representatives.
Kezia Dugdale, you're leaving Parliament to get involved with this organisation after I don't know how many years you will be there, but what would you like to be able at the end of it to say you've achieved?
The end of Parliament?
No, the end of being involved with the Trust.
Yeah, I think there's a real crisis in politics at the moment, certainly a crisis of trust in the political process, and it's time to take a step back, do some serious, rigorous research, which is what the John Smith Centre will do, into what the public think about politicians and the political process, offer that analysis, but also offer some options, some prescriptions for change about how to make things better. And one great example of that, which the Centre has in place already, is an internship programme to break down that traditional model of what
Catherine's talked about that.
Like.
But I mean, isn't part of the problem with this is that even at the level you two are talking about it, you immediately run into political problems. I mean, Nigel Farage, who was an Andrew Marr, for example, would say, well, it's very obvious why people don't trust politicians at the moment. We voted for Brexit and Brexit hasn't happened. No amount of internships or training programmes or outreaches to the public will alter the fact they voted for something and it's not been achieved. So even at that level, you immediately run into effectively politics.
I think talking about Europe is a really good example of where our politics is broken, because it's become so polarised. The language that people use is so robust and personalised. We've lost the ability to rationalise, to look at evidence, to change our minds when circumstances change, to make the type of compromise that we need to make good public
maybe,
policy.
but Catherine,
that was different 25 years ago, and that's the contrast, I guess, we're
sure,
trying to draw.
but you know, the point, I mean, I'm taking Nigel Farage as an example of this. I mean, what he would say is, look, I'm not using abusive language. I'm not abusing anyone personally. I'm just making the point the British people voted for something and it isn't happened. And that's why confidence, he says, in politicians is falling. And my point is that as soon as you get in, even at the level you're talking about these things, to the substance of the issue, it very quickly becomes about politics.
But that's what we want to change. We want to understand why it is that people see it so negatively. So what you're talking about is a lack of trust. Now, that's not especially new for politicians, but it seems to be at a different level. And when my father was a politician, argument, intellect and wit were the pieces in his armoury that he used. His political opponent, Sir John Major, gave our first inaugural John Smith lecture in February at the John Smith Centre. And he spoke with enormous warmth about their political friendship. He talked about how they would have very robust exchanges across the dispatch box during Prime Minister's questions. But then afterwards, literally immediately afterwards, retire to his office and enjoy a drink together. Share secrets, have private conversations that they were absolutely confident wouldn't be shared.
See, again, it's ambiguous.
Is this something that we consider seriously happening today?
But it's ambiguous, isn't it? Because many people now, in the age of social media, you can imagine what they would say to that. They'd say, oh, that's the trouble with politicians. They're just a cabal at Westminster. Look at them. They're actually good pals and they go and drink together. And they're claiming the next minute that the policies of the either side would ruin the country.
Well, I personally think it's a sign of political confidence if you can identify political opponents with whom you can have a personal, respectful relationship. I also think it's a sign of political confidence if you can see issues on which you can agree. And it seems to be terribly unfashionable for politicians at the moment to actually make common cause where they can. And that's the sort of discussion that we're trying to encourage and the sort of politician that we're trying to give some space for. What we also want to do at the centre, as well as highlighting problems and understanding them, is actually highlight the great examples. The vast majority of MPs and MSPs are actually hard-working constituency MSPs who are making enormous change and a force for good in their local communities and are respected by their local communities. And that's something that we should be celebrating and talking about a little bit more.
Now, putting your active politician hat back on for a moment, Labour, European elections, the manifesto they've produced continues, rightly or wrongly, this position of we're in favour of Brexit, but if we can't get Brexit, we'd like a general election. If we can't get a general election, we'd like, a referendum, perhaps. Do you think Labour are wrong? Do you think Jeremy Corbyn and his team should have gone straight down and said that we want to stay, we want another referendum?
There's no doubt this is a very complex issue, and for 3 years we've had our leading politicians battle it out, which is why you have a complex and nuanced position in Labour's manifesto for the forthcoming European elections. Would I like it to be bolder? I think I've said very clearly in the past that I'm a staunch advocate of a people's vote. I would like to stop Brexit, and that's my vehicle for doing that. Other people think it's just a generally
But do you think that Labour's policy at the
moment
moment will benefit it or backfire?
I think Labour's policy is complex but clear, because it says first and foremost we would reject Theresa May's deal. Second of all, we would prefer Labour's alternative plan. If we can't have that, we want a general election. And if that can't be achieved, then yes, a people's vote is what should take place.
All right, Luke, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much for coming in.